The morning of my mother's funeral didn't feel real. The world was gray, like it had decided to mourn with me. My heels crunched on the gravel of the cemetery as I stepped out of the car, dressed in black, hands trembling. My heart ached so deeply I could barely breathe. But I wasn't prepared for what waited beyond the grief. As I walked toward the casket, I saw my dad, stone-faced, standing stiff like a soldier, not a grieving husband. My aunts were whispering, avoiding my gaze. My older brother, Daniel, didn't even look up. I assumed it was grief, but it was something else, something colder. Mom had been battling cancer for 2 years. I was her caregiver. I dropped out of med school to be with her, moved back home, and gave up everything. I bathed her, fed her, held her hand through every chemo cycle. I was there when the doctors gave up. I was there when she begged me to stay with her that last night. But I stepped out that one night just for an hour. My friend Mia had begged me to come have coffee. "You need air," she said. When I returned, Mom was gone. The hospice nurse said it was peaceful, but my dad never forgave me for it. And I didn't know how deep his hatred had festered. At the funeral, when the pastor asked if anyone wanted to say a few words, I stepped forward. My legs wobbled as I stood by the casket. I wanted to tell the world what she meant to me, how she wasn't just my mother, but my anchor. I opened my mouth, but the moment I said she was my best friend, my father rushed forward and slapped me in front of everyone. The sound echoed. My face stung. My heart shattered. "She died because of you," he screamed, voice raw with rage. "You left her when she needed you most." Gasps filled the air. My uncle tried to pull him back. I stood frozen, trembling. My eyes met Daniel's. He didn't move, didn't defend me, didn't even flinch. I stepped away from the casket, humiliated, cheeks burning hotter than the summer sun. My father collapsed against the side of the casket, sobbing loudly now. But it wasn't grief. It was blame. Pure, venomous blame. I ran behind the church, past the tombstones. My black heels sank into the wet grass. I sank onto a bench near the willow tree Mom used to love. My sobs were silent. My soul was bleeding. But then I remembered her words from just a week before she died. "Don't let them erase you when I'm gone." She knew. She knew what they would do. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, the one I hadn't planned on returning to. I could still smell her perfume on the sheets. The walls whispered memories, but also truths I had ignored for too long. My dad never wanted a daughter. Daniel was the golden child. I was just the caretaker, the invisible one, the burden, and now the scapegoat. But I wasn't going to stay invisible anymore. The next morning, while they were still sleeping off the drama, I went to Mom's study, her private space. I opened her old oak drawer with the brass key she once gave me in secret. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. She'd written them over the past year, and at the bottom, her will, an unsigned draft but with instructions. She wanted to leave me everything. The house, the savings, her half of the family business, an antique shop downtown that she co-owned with Dad. But she had never finalized the paperwork. My dad had insisted it wait, said she was being emotional, but the truth was it was deliberate. She wanted me to know her intentions, to make a choice. She had left the map. Now it was my turn to draw the lines. I looked in the mirror, still bruised from the slap, eyes red, lips trembling, and whispered, "If they want to treat me like I killed her, then let them see what I can build from that pain." I had a plan, and this time I wasn't asking permission. I didn't return to the house after that. Not for dinner, not to sleep, not even to collect the rest of my things. I called Mia and asked if I could crash at her place. No questions, no pity, just a place where the air didn't choke me. She handed me a blanket and said, "Stay as long as you need." But I didn't come here to rest. I came to reset. In the next few days, I went through every document my mother left behind. The unsigned will, her journal entries, even legal letters she never mailed. I made copies, scanned everything, and visited a probate lawyer. He read through it all and sat back in his chair with a slow whistle. "She intended to make you the sole heir of her personal and business assets," he said, tapping the last page. "This could hold up in court, especially with the letter and her mental state certified in the hospice records. But your father's going to fight." "I'm not afraid of a fight," I said. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't care. My dad had erased me at her funeral, but my mother had left behind breadcrumbs, and I was going to follow them all the way out of the shadows they buried me in. What they didn't expect was that while I was grieving, I was also gathering power. I applied for an emergency petition to place a temporary hold on the antique shop's financial accounts. The court granted it. My father couldn't pull a single dime from the business account without notifying me. I then filed a motion to open probate with my mother's draft while citing evidence of intent. But I wasn't done. I posted a heartfelt message on the antique shop's social media, the one I had helped Mom build during lockdown. It read, "This store was my mother's dream, and I was proud to help her nurture it. Though she's no longer with us, I intend to honor every piece of her legacy, not through anger, but through love. To our loyal customers, thank you. To those who knew the truth," she whispered only to a few of us, "I won't let her be forgotten." The post went viral locally. Clients I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. Former neighbors stopped by the shop to leave flowers. One even shared an old video of my mom and I during a Christmas sale, laughing together, hugging. Meanwhile, my father sent me a cease and desist. He accused me of trespassing on the business. He called me unstable, a liar. He used the word ungrateful. He threatened to tell everyone what I did the night Mom died. So, I let him. At the family mediation meeting, my father exploded again. "She abandoned her mother the night she died," he shouted across the table. The lawyer, calmly flipping through the medical records I'd provided, said, "Actually, the nurse's notes clearly state the patient was resting comfortably and passed in her sleep. She received morphine and was in no visible distress." My father went silent. But Daniel, my brother, the one who hadn't even said a word at the funeral, decided it was his turn to speak. "She was never there for Mom until the end," he sneered. "She played caretaker for attention. We all know it." That's when I pulled out the journal. My mother's handwriting filled the pages, detailed notes about every medication dose I gave, every bath I helped with, every night I sat beside her while they were too busy. She wrote about how proud she was of me, how she feared what would happen after she was gone. And the last entry, "They love her only when she's silent, but silence is not her gift. She is meant to roar." I read it aloud, and for the first time in years, Daniel looked ashamed. The mediator leaned forward. "I think we're done here. This will be resolved in court." But even as the legal side moved forward, I had something else in motion. See? Mom had always talked about renovating the shop's back room, turning it into a reading lounge for guests. She never got around to it. I did. I used my savings, reached out to a few local artisans Mom used to support, and built the exact space she dreamed of. A corner with vintage chairs, tea service, and a picture wall of her favorite customers, and one large framed photo of her and me, arms around each other, laughing, her scarf blowing in the wind. The day we reopened the shop officially under the Eleanor Grace Foundation, my father showed up. He stood in the doorway, stunned. He looked at the photo, then at the crowd, then at me. He stepped forward and said, "You have no right." And that's when the county officer serving papers stepped up behind him. "You've just been notified. Effective immediately, Ms. Grace has been named the rightful executive and majority shareholder of this business. You are hereby ordered to vacate the premises." He didn't even argue, just stared at me like I was a stranger. But I wasn't the stranger. I was just the daughter they had tried to erase. I had come back not as the girl begging for space at a funeral, but as the woman who built something stronger from her grief. And I wasn't done yet. I thought watching my father walk out of that antique store humiliated, defeated, would bring peace. It didn't because grief doesn't care about victories. It waits. It aches in quiet rooms. It curls up beside you when the guests leave and the applause dies down. And every time I opened that shop door in the morning for a split second, I expected to see my mother behind the counter with her usual chipped mug and that half smile that said, "Let's make today count." But she wasn't there, and the silence screamed. I poured myself into the shop. I restored the stained glass windows she always said she'd fix. I reopened her favorite supplier contracts. I hosted free workshops for young collectors just like she dreamed of. I even brought back her old loyalty card system and mailed one to every former customer. The response was overwhelming. People came in and said, "Your mother would be so proud." But that's when the letters started arriving. Not from strangers, from debt collectors. Apparently, my father had been siphoning funds from the business account for months before my mom passed, taking out loans against the building, pawning antique items for cash, even selling a valuable French armoire that was meant for me. I dug deeper and discovered he'd forged her signature on 2 bank authorizations. My mother had been dying, and he was preparing for a future without her, but not one with me in it. I brought the documents to my lawyer. She stared at them for a long time and said, "You could press criminal charges, fraud, embezzlement." I wanted to say yes. I wanted revenge to look like a courtroom, like a sentence, like a mugshot. But then something happened that twisted everything. One morning, as I was arranging tulips near the entrance, her favorite flowers, an elderly woman walked in. She looked nervous. I offered her tea and she finally said, "I knew your mother. We used to volunteer together. I was with her at hospice that last afternoon." I froze. She opened her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a letter written in my mother's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say this in person. I need you to know something. I saw what your father did. I knew, and I didn't stop it because I was too tired. But I never blamed you for what happened to me. I'm sorry he made you believe that. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger at the end. But if you ever feel lost, know this. I chose you, not them. You always, you." I collapsed in the chair and sobbed. All the doubt, all the buried guilt. It melted away in that moment. She knew and she loved me still. Even in her final breath, she was protecting me. The old woman gently placed a tiny blue box in my hand. She asked me to give this to you when the time was right. Inside was my mother's antique ring, the one she wore every single day and swore she'd never take off. It was engraved inside, "To the daughter who saved me." That night, I walked into my father's apartment. I had access to his rental history now that probate was finalized and found him sitting alone, disheveled. A man who had spent his whole life thinking he was too important to fall. He looked up at me and laughed bitterly. "Come to gloat." I sat down, calm, unshaken. "No. I came to return something," I said, placing a copy of the letter on the table. He read it in silence, then threw it down like it burned him. "She never forgave me." "No," I said, voice steady. "But I did, and that's what makes me stronger than you'll ever be." He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just sat there, a hollow man whose pride had eaten his family alive. I stood up and turned to leave, but before I walked out, I said, "You blamed me for her death to distract from the fact that she died watching you lie, cheat, and destroy everything she loved. That shame is yours to carry, not mine." And I left, without looking back. In the months that followed, I turned the store into something even bigger. I started a foundation in my mother's name for young women estranged from their families, funding therapy and legal aid for daughters who were blamed, silenced, erased. I started speaking at events, quietly at first, then louder. I told my story, not to ruin my father's name, but to reclaim my own. 1 year to the day after her funeral, I stood in the center of the shop during a charity gala. The chandelier shimmered overhead, and the new sign gleamed in the window. Eleanor's legacy, from dust to light. And as I looked around the room at the women, at the warmth, at the life, I smiled for the first time in a long while. Not because I'd won, but because I had survived. I had risen. And this time, no one could take that from me.